Yeah.
Who are these Asians?
Who are these Asians?
And what are they talking about?
Who are these Asians? What are they talking about? They live in a mystical land where things happen, people are born, weather changes, the seasons happen, mystical shit.
Mystical.
Mystical. So let's talk about Bushido. We did a whole, I don't think we should kind of dwell on the historical context of Bushido as a sort of an ideological framework for how the samurai were supposed to have acted, because Bushido is, well, we talked about it, historically rooted in more modern texts.
Yeah. I did have some things to say about how they say things in the sidebars, and again, important stuff that should probably not be in a sidebar.
Let's start there, because I have similar notes.
Let's do it.
Emma, can you take us away?
So start with Bushido in historical Japan.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We do, but wait, Bushido in historical Japan. Ah, yes. I was on the wrong page. Go for it, Emma.
All right, so Rokugani Bushido is quite different from anything that existed historically in Japan. While historical samurai had deep-held convictions that they lived and died for, there is no single text that defined Bushido for all samurai. Outside of Japan, cultural understanding of Bushido comes in large part from retrospective efforts to understand the past. Inazo Nitobe's Bushido, the Soul of Japan from 1900 is one text written by a Japanese scholar to explain Bushido to English speakers. Nitobe offers military knightways as a translation of Bushido and expands it to the precepts of knighthood, the noblesse oblige of the warrior class. Okay, much as the code of chivalry in Europe has been romanticized to fit with the values of later writers, Nitobe's account of Bushido is a product of its own time, after the era of the samurai, and it can help readers understand the history of Western views on Bushido.
That should have been main text.
I feel like there needs to be a whole section at the beginning that's just like, here's the deal. Don't be jerks to each other. Make this game fun. FYI, this is based on historical Japan, but we've decided to change a bunch of things and put this in there. Yeah. But also, I have some notes about the wording of this that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but I can do that.
I want to hear it. I want to hear it now.
I think now's the time.
We're all just like, please, keep talking.
Fuck yeah.
Because okay, in general, this seems good, right?
Sure.
This isn't historically accurate, but there are statements that make it a much weaker statement than I think it should be. So saying historical samurai had deeply held convictions that they lived and died for. That could either be taken as a very general statement, or it's sort of saying Bushido was real. They're just starting with this basis that Bushido was a thing. But it just wasn't written down yet. And all Nitobe did was explain it to non-Japanese people in English. But that's kind of muddying the complex nature of what happened there and what Bushido is. And so the statements in here just aren't as strong as I would like them to be, but it's hard to do that in a sidebar.
Right.
And saying that our understanding of Bushido comes from retrospective efforts to understand the past ignores the fact that historiography, books like Soul of Japan, they're created narratives. It's not just an attempt to understand the past, it's actually creating narratives, it's creating certain perspectives on the past. And so we have to look at the context in which it was created, which they kind of hint at that you should do, but you're really still left with this idea that Bushido was a thing. Might have been a monolith, maybe a little more complicated, but it was just there waiting to be explained to a Western audience. And it kind of ignores the fact that Nitobe kind of created Bushido in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot that happened to create our current concept of Bushido. So just a mini Asians recommend if anyone ever wants to look into like the historiography of Bushido. There's a book called Inventing the Way of the Samurai that is excellent, if not sort of dense and not like a fun read, but it's by Oleg Benish from 2014, and it breaks it down really well. And that Bushido wasn't really a thing until the 1890s. And there were periods of time where everyone in Japan was like, Bushido's a terrible idea, and this is kind of horrible. So, you know, just looking at the idea, tracing the history of that, worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say that on this like Bushido thing and the overall scope of Rokugan and L5R, there's an increasing amount of tension I get as we go through these readings. And Emma, you've kind of like scratched that that scar that is there from like the original readings, because we know that through the text, Rokugan is kind of this pastiche of Asian cultures, but Bushido is very much some kind of a product of Japan within this time period, and like it is quite specific as to what it is and what it represents. But in the text itself, it says we are inspired by Asian culture, and I did like a Mr. Rogers, Uncle Rogers accent there. I don't know what I did.
Asian culture is what you
Asian
said.
culture.
That's what you said.
I shouldn't have done that. But that said, we have Bushido as being divinely given by the gods for Pan-Asia, and that can really skew someone's view of East Asia, especially considering that the book often claims that we're here to like give people a sense of like, oh, it's actually really interesting to do your research and whatnot. You're actually setting people up, I think, for failure and actually quite a bit of pain.
There's layers of there's like layers of dense smoke in play here. It's like the first layer, I guess at the top layer is the layer of we are a bunch of Westerners who are inspired by popular media, and we're going to try to make a samurai game, a representation of historical Japan under the guise of fantasy. But this is very much them trying to represent historical Japan. Otherwise, they wouldn't use the word samurai, they wouldn't use Bushido, and they wouldn't use daimyo and shogun. These are all highly politicized words, right? So at the top layer, they have their Western media-influenced understandings of Japan. And then underneath that, they have the research that they've done, the reliance on sort of Western scholarship into these time periods. On top of that, we have the sort of blending of historical time periods, which makes it very difficult because you homogenize centuries and centuries of samurai history, right? Then, underneath all of that is Nitobe's work, which was written at a time when Japan was being forced to rapidly modernize and interact with the Western world. So his accounts are also very much a highly romanticized work in a sense, a way to appeal, a kind of a way to think about a romantic past that might not have been the case. So we have media, sort of Western media, romanticizing Japan. We have Western scholarship romanticizing Japan, right? And the different layers of, how scholars train others. Like Emma and I, our supervisor, or my ex-supervisor, Emma's current supervisor, used to always do this thing where he's like, here's my academic genealogy. And Emma, you don't have to comment, but he would show that he would have this PowerPoint and he would show all the people who have trained him. And it's like 6 degrees of white dude, right? And so scholarship really influences how people do their research and the information that people can get, right? And then on top of that, the foundation of all of it is based on something that is not an intentional misrepresentation, or at least a facetious misrepresentation, but indeed a misrepresentation of the past. So you have all these different layers that are like bouncing your light, the real Bushido, all around until you basically get nothing. Or you get something that is Keanu Reeves in 47 Ronin. So I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses here, is that they don't know what they want their source to be in L5R. Or they don't want to communicate that to the reader. And sorry, this has been meandering, but I've been thinking about this for a while.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I can actually, one of my biggest frustration with L5R in general, no matter who the publisher is, it's like they always try to meet the what's considered to be the cultural correct standard, the standards of the time, but they always have this layer of, well, you don't really have to use any of this politically correct stuff if you don't want to use it. It's always been like, this is the correct way you should do it, but feel free to ignore all of that. Which
Tasha's.
Like Tasha.
is basically trying to straddle both sides, basically trying to make both sides happy, which ends up making nobody happy.
It's like I bet you they're the only TTRPG company that I can't even say that with a straight face. That is the industry. They have all these these cultural touch points and these, I will say, legacy touch points that they have to hit on. Like you've said with the art. And who's that character with the Fu Manchu and who's like a
Kuniori.
Yeah, that asshole.
Mm-hmm. We're about to get another one.
Wait, what do you mean? Is it in this
Kuniori?
a new Kuniori?
No,
I'm not scrolling.
No, a new Fu Manchu character.
Oh no, start cut out.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, a new Fu Manchu character.
Oh my god.
It's about to rear its head in the LCG.
Is there art?
I mean, he was a Fu Manchu character in the old game, but they really could have. There is art.
Please send. Oh.
I am working on it. I'm pulling it up right now.
But that's the thing, right? So many times, I would say like eight times out of 10, when there's a piece of art that we're looking at that is a character from the established rokugan, you'd be like, yeah, they really didn't change much. Or they had an opportunity to make them less problematic, but they wanted people to recognize them.
Yeah. Well, people will recognize people. I definitely recognize him.
And that's the same thing with, but that also, the idea of recognizing something familiar is also what they're doing with Japanese history here. Oh, they want people to recognize a history of Japan, but in this not Japan.
And only the Japan that
oh my
is
lord
recognizable. Yeah.
Well, what?
Were you the last one to open that link?
Yeah.
What?
I think he was.
Is this character like undead?
What the hell's wrong with his face? Is he wearing...
Because
it's a mask. It's a mask.
Oh, is this a it's a Scorpion clan, of course.
It's a Scorpion character.
I can see. Yeah,
but
it's Yogo Junzo.
But it looks
It
looks like a skull mask.
It looks like a skull.
in previous editions, is he like undead or something?
In previous edition, he's the one that basically sets off the resurrection of Fuling. Officially sets it off. Like
you
he's
shall
the one
never again set foot in Rokugan.
He's the one that opens the black. He's the one that officially, although like a Fox Clan daimyo opened the first black scroll, he's the one that officially opened the first scroll that set off the clan wars.
Okay, so I have so many questions.
I'm gonna immediately comment and get this out of the way. Yo, it's a Party City mask. That's like bad. That's like bad construction. That's like bad shit. Like you gotta sand that down way better, and like you gotta start contouring that shit. Also, you don't make a domino mask out of bone. That's ridiculous. If you're gonna do bone, do a full like half face mask so it looks like a skull. What Party City level?
It looks
For those of you who aren't in Toronto or Canada, Party City is like this big costume retailer.
Oh no, we have them in the US too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we
You're thinking of Spirit Halloween. That's the Canadian brand.
Oh,
We
yeah,
have
the
that
one
in the
they
US too.
Oh,
Yeah,
do
we
you
have
now?
Spirit-
Okay,
yeah, we have
okay.
Spirit Halloween.
So yeah, there's one
Okay.
brand that is Canadian. Daniel, I know what you're talking about, but Party City I think is the meme one
the
that
one
we
that's
do.
on the one that's on the Queensway.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. That is that's a very local branch, and I forget the exact name, but I know what you're
Okay.
talking about.
Okay. So I got a question, and
Mhm.
this is for Emma and Sar, I guess. He's practicing magic using a talisman in his left hand. Is that kind of magic something that you see in Japan? Because that right away to me speaks as Taoist magic.
I know that there's a tradition called Omniodo, which is very similar to Taoist magic. Almost, I think, honestly, I think they just took Taoism and translated it to Japan and called it Omniodo.
Yeah, you got to remember that Japan
There's a lot of overlap.
took in all of
There's-
this
yeah.
stuff from China. So
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's why I was
Yeah.
asking. I'm like, did this become prevalent in Japan?
I don't know if anyone looking like that was doing
Exactly.
things like that. But yeah.
Cool. No, just that was less of a criticism, more of a question. My criticisms are mostly for like that face.
Yeah.
It's unnecessary.
And it looks like he's
Completely.
also like styled the mustache because it's like it bends at an angle, like an insect's leg,
It's
like a
if-
scorpion's leg.
if you actually zoom in on the picture, like really zoom in, you'll see that those are actually strings that attaches to his robe.
No, I'm
what?
very zoomed in right now. Sorry, chat.
It's
His skin and she's
yeah.
attached to his clothing.
No, it looks like
No,
his
no, like-
mask has red strings
Oh.
that run into his shoulder.
Okay.
it runs into his shoulders.
All right. Interesting.
I can't find a better art than this. Was like he was previewed like this week, I want to say. So we haven't he hasn't been officially been released yet, but yeah.
I get this like punch to the gut when I think about fans who look at this art, look at this card, and they're like, they get excited and elated. They're like, wow, I can't wait to use this. And for like those are the fans that would make me feel very uncomfortable to be around. And generally, I don't feel uncomfortable at cons. In fact, despite my best intentions, I make people feel uncomfortable at cons by being too loud. But that said, these are the kind of fans where like I would really question if I should be in this space, like if it's safe for me. And safety I mean in a very broad sense. So rough feelings I don't plan on unpacking on the stream tonight, but sharing the initial thoughts there.
Yeah. L5R is like, it's one of those organized play scenes that I'm like, I don't know. Same thing. I mean, there are a lot of properties though where I wouldn't want to just do it at a con with random people. Like Warhammer is also one of them. As much as I love painting minis, that community is also just as toxic, if not more.
Apparently Warhammer fans, the ones I've played with, don't like when you roleplay each individual unit. Apparently they think it slows things down, and I'm like, why did you invite me?
Yeah, but there are games where you're encouraged to do that. And there's one called Kill Team.
Yeah.
There's one called Kill Team, and you're supposed to name each little dude.
Yeah, name them. They have their own like little thing going on.
And
like
you cry
I think
every time they die.
Oh yeah, we sit there in silence when someone dies, and it's like war's horrible. And
we played it once on the Asians Represent Discord virtually through Tabletop Simulator. It was me, Joe, Amber, and Drew, one of our mods, and I picked a really slow army, and I didn't get into the fight until like an hour into our game, and everybody was killing each other, and I still lost.
One last thing about this art, I feel like companies really need to diversify the look of their bad guys. Because first of all, there's the Fu Manchu, there's the robes, standard Asian bad guy attire since, you know, the yellow peril in the 30s, 40s, 50s. But also, stop making bald guys bad guys. Like just as someone who doesn't have hair, stop making bald guys or people losing their hair bad guys, because that is just a trope. And really take some time to experiment with new bad guy designs. There was an opportunity here, and they just went with every trope.
Well, again, they're like, this is brand recognition is really what they're going for.
Absolutely.
Here. But I'm really curious about these strings now. I can't stop.
I think not on this stream, but maybe on one of our wrap-ups. Jeremy, I'd love to talk to you about toxic masculinity,
I have
and the intersection of being an Asian man.
Yeah.
I think this art here touches a tiny bit on what you talked about, and what I'm talking about too.
We should do it. We should
Also,
do an
this-
episode
this
of the
dude-
wrap-up on it.
This dude can never move his head. Like he's like Michael Keaton in the old Batman movies. He can only turn his whole body. He can't turn his head. Like, come on.
My favorite.
I love when Batman Begins came out and they were talking about the costume. They were like, "This is the first time that a Batman actor will be able to move his head."
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just looked up the older art for this character.
The older art is really bad.
It's
also,
really, really bad. I just like it.
I think the new one's an
It's actually an
improvement on the old one, but like all that they did with the new one is they made him not look like he's undead.
Undead, yeah.
Okay, but here's the
and the
thing.
old
But
one,
here's
he was undead.
that's a thing to talk about though with L5R and D and all this stuff. It's like the new one is an improvement on the old one, but it's still bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, the companies
Because the old one is all the way down here, and the new one is just like
slightly up.
here. Like,
but
come
it's
on,
just
you really
but it's
didn't
just
go
like
very far.
so easy to just do this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but they don't.
Or like push it to the side and never look at it again.
Yeah, or just you just like ignore it.
Look, there's just ways to me. My biggest frustration with all these golden cows with coming back as racist as ever is that there were opportunities to change them, in the canon there are opportunities to change the way that they look, to change the way that they behave, to change the way that they dress, to not make it so bad. You could have kept the name Yogo Junzo. You could have kept the story just the same. Just change the way he looks so it doesn't, it's not as offensive. There are ways to redesign the characters, but still invoke the original feeling of the character.
Yeah, or you just do what Games Workshop did with Warhammer Fantasy, like Warhammer Fantasy. And I learned this because I put out a tweet, and I mistakenly put out a tweet and got the floodgates opened. Thank you, people who responded, though. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. But Warhammer Fantasy has some really terrible stuff. And you know what they did? They just ended the world and started again. And people were upset at the beginning, but now people love it. It's not that hard.
Exactly. And the biggest one, the biggest example of a franchise that actually that I think successfully did this, Star Trek.
Yeah.
The Kelvinverse.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, like, let's think about comic books.
Oh God.
Let's talk about post-Civil War in the Marvel universe. Let's talk about post-Civil War. Let's talk about this is not a spoiler because this has been a long time. Spider-Man and Mary Jane make a deal with the devil and sacrifice their love to bring back Aunt May and reset the timeline.
I'm still mad about that. I'm still very mad
and
about that.
Like they've reset it so many times. People did not care, right? People didn't care at all, right? And look, when universes change, there is room for growth within a franchise. Look at Into the Spider-Verse, the most perfect example.
Exactly.
A lot of these comic book refusal to institute real change is based on the idea that, like, our fan base won't accept it, or it's based on the idea like we need to appeal to this this particular breed of customer, when ignoring all the other people,
all the potential,
all the potential,
Exactly.
all the people that prefer Miles Morales over Peter Parker, and they're like, no, we got to keep Peter Parker young and relevant. He can't be married. That is based on this idea that somehow marriage, and this is a thing in comic books, marriage and a healthy relationship and growing and potentially starting a family is somehow something that people don't want to see, somehow something that people do not relate to, that, oh, we need to always have our characters young and edgy or relevant or single. And DC tried to do this with the New 52, and it was ultimately a failure. And then they rebooted again a few years later and made Superman a dad with a kid, and that was 10 times more popular. Except they screwed that up now too, because they've like aged up Superman's son and put him in like the Legion of Superheroes, which is something I also hate. It's just like, it's these things are natural parts of life. These changes are not things that you should automatically reject in the sake of trying to hit some strange metric of like youthful relevance.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I really want to like touch on the point you made where they want to cater to their existing fan base to make sure they don't upset them. But in doing so, they like completely miss out on all of the other fans that they would gain. Look, Spider-Man as a character, his stock shot up significantly after Into the Spider-Verse. Because there are a lot more kids now who are looking at Miles Morales and being like, oh, I can relate to that. Oh, that character feels real.
Yes.
Right?
But producer Steve's going to be like, I think this is a great conversation.
This is a great conversation, but let's just go back to L5R.
We were planning to finish. I know, right?
I don't know why.
We're going to finish the stream. We've done one sidebar.
Yeah.
Let's forge ahead.
The last thing I'd like to say about Yogo is the only way I can see using him in a story or a campaign is to make him the embodiment of racist stereotypes. And so all you're doing is fighting against racism when you're playing that story.
That can be real tricky too. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
So funny story in the old game, in the old storyline, his ultimate demise was that his head was trampled by the steed of Utako Komoko.
Who's that?
The Unicorn Clan Thunder.
Oh.
Basically So he was basically trampled to death.
Oof.
Damn.
All right.
So there's another example related to Asian media that I want to talk about. Then we're gonna do this, and it kind of relates to portraying a character like this, the Fu Manchu, the long mustache. So if you really like Hong Kong action cinema, the Shaw Brothers, Kung Fu movies, all that, there's a character who many people only know in the West from a white man's movie, and that's Pai Mei. So
yeah.
So think about Pai Mei. So you've seen Kill Bill. He's the kung fu master who teaches the bride how to fight. Right? He is like a harsh, cruel master. And when you watch it, and you watch Tarantino's movie, you're like, oh, this is kind of like a stereotype of a kung fu master. But then if you look back at the old Shaw Brothers movies, Bak Mei, Pai Mei, it's the same character. Right? And based on a potentially historical person who led to the downfall of the Shaolin. So my question to all of you is, how do you kind of account for that? How do you account for a character who, if made by a non-Asian person, can seem very problematic, but when made by an Asian person, isn't problematic at all? And that's a tough one with this character right here. Because while I think Emma would do a great job including this character in this depiction in a story, would I want that to be a product written by somebody who wasn't Emma? Probably
It wouldn't
not.
be a product at all. Like, it would be one-time personal table.
Or even at a con, would you want somebody else to run that story for you? Who knows? But let's move on. Sorry, as producer Steve said.
That is a very good conversation. I have no response right now because it's so deep.
But
you just have nothing.
But the answer is that the portrayal of the character is not the character itself shouldn't just be based on appearance. While portrayals of Bakme and Paime and that master, the old white master. And I say white because of his beard, not his skin. In Kung Fu movies, the characters might look the same. What they do, their relationships with other characters, is very, very different. Right? We could do a whole thing on Kung Fu movies, but we're not going to do that now. Donnie Yen, please come onto this podcast. It's not going to happen. Anyways.
Yeah, we have to finish talking about samurai and honor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, to be quite honest, for the next page here for honor, I don't think there's a lot to
we've
say
talked
that we
about
haven't
this.
already covered.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So I would say that we could probably skip that. The next sidebar is Bushido Rokugan, but to be honest, it actually echoes the same sidebar, Emma, that you just talked about, where it talks about kind of historical Bushido and like how Rokugan doesn't try to meet that standard, which, as you've already said, is more nuanced than the text really gives credit to.
Well,
and then
yeah.
we move on to the tenets of Bushido. And this next section here really takes those 7 tenets here and gives you very concrete examples of ways that you would breach those tenets in ways that you would adhere to them through sacrifice.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I really like this section. Sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
Well, I think one of the things I kind of want to double back like 30 seconds to something you said. This sidebar on page 301 is important because it highlights, it says at the very end, it says where they disagree on which tenets Bushido can be allowed to slide with the least consequence and which can be upheld no matter what. Now, Bushido, as it's portrayed in the world, is this like social ideology that is highly enforceable, right? But Bushido here, they don't really portray it as an individualistic ideology or something that somebody, reflects on. What does Bushido mean to them? It's always, what does Bushido mean to your clan? Never, what does Bushido mean to you as an individual? Where can you, let things slide? How does that affect you as a person? And when you integrate that into the mechanics of Bushido, losing honor and glory and gaining honor and glory, it makes Bushido more of a social ideology than an individualistic one, when in reality it would probably be a mix of both, more leaning towards the individual in the context of these adventurers in Rokugan. But I don't know if an RPG can do that or has done that well. But what we can look at is the tenets of Bushido.
And for this and some of the explanations, it doesn't really clear things up for me for how this works naturally, because they're saying there are some tenets that must be upheld at all costs. And for me, that automatically makes it unrealistic. Also, saying that something is more objective does not make it not subjective. So being this is objective or more objective and everyone accepts it and understands it, it's nah.
Nope.
Still subjective.
So let's go.
That's not gonna work.
Let's review the tenets of Bushido. So each of the 7 tenets listed below is accompanied by a number of examples of situations when a character might have to forfeit honor to disobey it, like it's a currency, need to stake honor on upholding it, or receive an honor reward for giving something up to pursue it. The GM can use these as guidelines for honor losses and awards. Compassion, Jin. Just as the farmer does not grow crops merely to fill their own belly, the warrior does not fight for just their own sake. A samurai must be completely aware of their duty to protect others. Breaches of compassion include: a minor breach is verbal cruelty to a foe or stranger, allowing easily prevented suffering, tormenting animals. Major breach: verbal cruelty to a friend, physically harming someone for revenge alone, letting an ally die without trying to save them. And a massive breach of compassion: murdering someone of lower status in cold blood, physically harming someone for fun. Okay. So what do we think?
That's okay. Of course, is the thing that is the word that just comes to mind. Of course, you should I mean, of course, you should be punished in some way for doing any of that thing, because that's just things that bad people do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Murdering is a good sign of lack of compassion.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know why it has to be codified like this. It's like, yeah, you shouldn't murder anybody.
Well, the way this has come up in the games that I've played is that at the end of the scenario, the GM turns to this page and then starts going through, be like, okay, you guys did this, or you didn't do that, or you did this, and it turns into like a checklist thing. And then if you turn to the next page, 302, my GM has then adjusted our honor scores based upon the sliding scale here after having gone through this checklist. So it was actually the first time I went through this process, it was kind of long and dull because he like went through everything bit by bit, and he was just like, okay, you guys didn't kill this guy, but you didn't treat him very well, so your honor is getting docked a little bit, but not as much as it could be.
In my head, a GM's just going, dishonor on you, dishonor on you.
Yeah, a little bit.
With this checklist.
I will say that in this sliding scale here, the very bottom one is I make my own code when you completely lose faith in Bushido. And to be honest, I just like the way that sounds. I make my own code.
That's how I would start.
Yeah, no kidding.
And there's a sidebar on Scorpion honor here. I don't know if we want to look at it.
We've skipped
We
out
read
on
that before.
We've read
You
this
did?
before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've talked about Scorpion honor at length because we
Oh, yeah.
scrolled all the way down when we were doing that. But we should go through like sacrifices for compassion because we've done breaches, and breaches are basically like don't cuss at someone.
Basically, yeah. Basically, don't be an awful person.
Yeah. Don't
They
murder
all
people below your status.
Again, it just everything on this list. Just the first time I read it, the first thing that came to my mind was, of course, you shouldn't do this.
But
Yeah.
we've run into passages in this book that suggest that a samurai is okay for them to kill like a lower status person, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's a couple
Yes.
weird like implied hints that I'm sure some player or GM will like misread and somehow codify that in the game, So
I'm really glad you brought that up because in a couple sections we will see more references to the half people or the non people, and there was explicit text in the first
Very
chapter or
beginning.
two about how they can be killed to test the sharpness of a blade, and that's like no one bats an eyelash at that. The world is explicitly cruel, and yet here we have this tenant that says otherwise. And good, the tenant should say otherwise, but also as a player, how the hell do you play with that now?
Yeah.
there's also I think an interesting data point is that Fantasy Flight Star Wars game, they have a morality system for Force users that have a very similar kind of like set of like tenets and what's the word
Jedi are based on samurai. Like,
right.
Yeah.
there you go.
They really
But
are.
but if you go on the Fantasy Flight forums, there are players who will argue, well, is this really murder? Is it, and that's a really weird.
Is this really murder?
Is
Yeah,
this really murder is a thing I never want to argue.
Right. But always in the context of like, oh, am I going to be penalized for me killing this person in this game? And it's a weird thing to read on a forum.
Yeah, but there are so many characters. I feel like there are so many characters in the world of Star Wars that don't follow this code and are still considered Jedi. Like Quinlan Voss. Like if we're Star Wars nerds, like Quinlan Voss is literally the most gray Jedi of all the Jedi. So much so that in Dark Disciple, the Jedi Council's like, we can't handle Count Dooku. We need you to team up with a Sag Ventress to go kill Count Dooku. We Jedi don't do this, but we're letting you do it, Quinlan Voss. Right? And I'm not defending Star Wars because there's a lot wrong with Star Wars, but I still feel like they do the Jedi Code better than this.
Yeah.
So let's do sacrifices for compassion. So examples are a minor sacrifice is giving someone a common useful item, spending 2 or more downtime scenes helping a friend, treating a foe's wounds after a battle. Major. Giving up your chance to be awarded 6 or more glory for someone else, saving someone's life despite knowing they may trouble you later. And massive, giving away an irreplaceable item, completing a dangerous heroic task for someone else who cannot repay you.
Wait. Okay, yeah. So this is where I was a little confused because saving someone's life, even though they might come back to trouble you, wasn't that explicitly listed as an element of a disadvantage in the previous section?
Maybe?
I forget which one, but they're like, oh, your problem is compassion, so you let people go and they're gonna mess with you later.
There's a disadvantage for, like, it's not called a sworn enemy, but that was the feeling you got. Your disadvantage is you have a rival out there somewhere who you didn't kill, but you have bested in combat, and maybe they have now like a scar or a disability because of your injury. And yeah,
but I think like sympathy or something was
soft-hearted or something like that.
Yeah, like
soft-hearted. Yes,
you let someone live.
Yeah, and they're like, well, that was a bad idea, but it's like now it clashes. There's a lot of inconsistencies between some of these examples, how the world is portrayed, and the other mechanics.
Yeah,
and they really wouldn't have these inconsistencies if they, had like cut maybe 150 pages out of this book.
And in my experience, just going back to the times that I've played, this section of the book where the GM is going through bullet by bullet and being like, oh, you guys did this, so dishonor to you. It kind of feels a little bit like the adversarial relationship we talked about before with the GM and players, where in, for example, like D&D or Pathfinder or something like that, the GM drops a really difficult monster in your path and is like, oh, I'm going to kill you guys. Or it's like, are you sure you want to go down that corridor? Here it's like, oh, time for the honor deductions. Boom, boom, boom. Dishonor on you. And that's not really my preferred style of a game anyways. And I think the way it's set up here, I mean, I don't know if that's the norm in L5R. That was the norm in my games.
To me, it feels very punitive. It feels like you wanted to do it this way, and you did it this way. That was against the way that I wanted you to do it, so I'm going to penalize you for it. The way that I like using this system is whenever this is me GMing, and I know people have their own style of doing it, but the way I like to do this is like, okay, here this character in particular, you are coming up on this crossroad. You can do A, and this is what's going to happen. You can do A, you can do B, and you can do C. You know exactly where your character falls with each one of those options. And you know exactly what the penalties are. If you don't know what the penalties are, ask me right now, and I'll tell you what the penalties are for you taking those actions, and the rewards are. And you make your own choice after that. It's less at the end. It's less, it's less gotcha and more, well, here's the options.
Yeah. I mean, like, Steve, you even said that earlier when you were talking about you were playing an OSR module and it was just like going down this route would have killed you no matter what. Or you said something along those lines.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. It's quite complex, and sorry, I have nothing much to add here because the next little sections here I'm kind of re-reviewing, and I don't particularly have much to say because it's all contradictory, so I have to believe it's by design, which, I mean, I understand wanting to design it so that your tenets contradict each other. It's like having that built-in tension of like what it means to be, we talked about this, superheroes. Like, superheroes have a tension built into them. Am I really a hero, or am I more of a freak? Am I really the savior, or am I really just a danger to everyone else? Right? And I'm using these labels specifically because Masks, a really great RPG, uses those labels, which are very personal, and the contradictions are baked in, and the system itself allows the players to talk about how those labels are enforced upon because of their society, because of living in a world where there are other superheroes who expect things of them, and how their actions may or may not live up to those labels and how they feel about them. And those labels don't actually hurt them, all they do is they affect the actions and decisions they make in the future. They don't lose any power. Like Spider-Man never loses his power in masks because he feels he's too much of a danger. Spider-Man just might feel too afraid to unleash everything that he can do.
You know what happened in Spider-Man 3? Like Tobey Maguire got shook and then started losing his power to shoot webs.
I thought it was because
two?
he went all emo, but
Emo is 3.
emo was 3. Emo was
Yeah,
3.
Emo was 3.
2, he does like he loses his power, but then decides to embrace like the normal life for a while. Not to tangential.
I want to actually talk about the thing you were saying, Steve. Do any of you, including Emma, do any of you know the game Hillfolk? So Hillfolk is a TTRPG published by Pelgrane Press, and in Hillfolk they codified for the first time exactly what you're talking about, Steve. And they have a system called dramatic polls within Hillfolk. So for those of you who are watching us live or watching on YouTube, look up Pelgrane Press Hillfolk. Whether you like the game or not, the dramatic poll system is really easy and can be adapted to any game as literally a one paragraph replacement for alignment. So what are dramatic polls? So dramatic polls are basically dramatic characteristics that form an internal contradiction for your character. So that could be a really great example that's going to be in media soon. They are actually adapting Robert Kirkman's Invincible into a TV show, an animated show on Amazon Prime. And Invincible is about a teenage superhero whose dad is this bigwig superhero who's an alien. But he is torn between his father trying to basically enslave the human race and his humanity. And those are his two dramatic pulls. And they pull the character from one end to the other in a way that isn't mechanical. Steve, your character Ning in Dungeons and Asians, two dramatic pulls. One, allegiance to the shadow, to your family, to the empire. And the other is your allegiance to your friends and your companions. And the reality of Xia. Right? So you have two dramatic pulls that are pulling you apart.
Quick interruption.
Yeah.
Over the course of our play, it's actually 3 dramatic pulls because it is the country, the empress, and her friends.
So you're being pulled apart by all of these different things, right? And there's nothing mechanical there. There's no value. There's no score to each of your dramatic pulls. They just exist, and they empower your role-playing, and they give the GM a non-mechanical way to create tension, but productive tension, which is super important. Right. So Steve, you immediately were like, okay, you were playing this like military character who's super like dogmatic. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you why the Empire is bad, and I'm going to make you feel. And that's how you make it more interesting without being like, oh, you lose glory or honor or anything like this. So if you liked what Steve said, use dramatic polls from Hillfolk. You don't even have to play Hillfolk if you don't like it. Just use dramatic polls instead of alignment. And it's literally a session 0 question. What are 2 things that are pulling you apart? What is keeping you torn? Right? Those are your dramatic pulls. Done. Right? You could. I think that would be super interesting in L5R as well.
I think that's what they try to do with like your Ninjo and your Giri.
Exactly.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. But then they kind of have other layers of mechanics to go with it.
Yeah.
I think the problem with L5R is just that there's not only is there like your Ningyo and your Giri, but there's also your clan, your family, your spiritual alignment. It becomes, to me, one of the issues that I do have sometimes GMing with GMing L5R is there's just a little too much to keep track of sometimes. It really is.
There's a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's like, because like character sheets is character sheets, fine, great, but like a D&D character sheet, you got your stats, you got your feats. L5R character sheets, you got your ring values, and you got your skill values, then you got the advantages, disadvantages, the Ningyo, the Giri. Then I got to think about what clan you are at, and is there any other clans that is, and what about the family, and what about your social status, and all this other stuff. It's like, Yeah.
There's a lot.
From a story, there's a lot. From a storytelling perspective, there's a lot, and I think that's why people sometimes take the easy way, which is the cookie cutter. The kung fu movie way or the samurai movie.
Yeah, and how do you consolidate all of those things you need to know into something simpler, right? Family, clan, like you could literally be like, okay, you have a social pole. You have a poll for, I don't know, you have a military poll since everybody's playing samurai. Mm-hmm. And then you could even have like a poll to represent the self. What do you want? What does your military duty dictate? And what do your social entanglements dictate? Yep. And there's the three and they cover everything.
I think the system in L5R could probably be simplified, like emphasize Ninjo and Giri more and like condense the advantages, disadvantages, that whole system into something that's more like traits or quirks or, signifiers of your character. Condense it all so that the focus is primarily on Ninjo and Giri, which is supposed to be at more of the thrust of this game, more of the forefront of this game, but is kind of buried under all this other stuff, including honor scores. This honor score stuff is a remnant from straight up from stuff. Oriental Adventures and the older stuff. It can be gotten rid of, in my opinion.
Yeah,
especially if there's also glory.
Yeah, glory status,
and glory.
Very similar.
When I got to the end of honor, I was like, okay, and then I was into glory. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh man.
For those of you who are watching live in the chat and are asking about a resource on dramatic polls, I shared a blog post by Robin Laws, who designed the drama system and Hillfolk, and that's a post on his thoughts on dramatic polls. So that's in our Twitch chat. Shall we move on? Do we want to read all of these? Do we want to go through each one, or?
I think one was a good example.
I think one's a good example because we've already covered what Bushidos are.
Yeah.
What Tenets are.
The only note I had was I still don't understand how honor is an element of honor, and
yep.
the examples didn't help. Okay, so some of this is like status related, but apparently honor has nothing to do with status. Yeah, whatever. Sorry, Steve.
No, it's okay. I feel like the honor piece here has so much nuance in like what it means to be Asian, East Asian, anyone other than white, because this touches on a cornerstone of like being that isn't well defined by autonomy and other core values that generally Western society holds. So for example, and I've been reading a lot of moral philosophy, so this is really relevant. If you were to ask someone like, is it morally objectionable if someone touches a dead body? They would be like, in the West, probably like, no, they're not a bad person for that. Like if you poke a dead body with a stick, it doesn't really hurt anyone. Therefore, like that's okay. They might be kind of like weird, and that has other things to unpack. But generally, like they haven't morally broken any codes. But in other cultures, that's just like morally reprehensible. Why would you do that? And it falls into kind of what various cultures hold sacred. And in Western cultures, that can be very, very different than other cultures. Daniel, you and I had a conversation the other day about Jade and how I was in a game where we were expected to break Jade, and my character would normally be like, probably okay with it. But me, Steve, was like, I don't feel good about that. I don't want to destroy Jade. That's like not okay with me. And I personally had to deal with that kind of opposition, and it took me out of the game and brought me back into what it means to be me. And then the game was kind of ruined for me at that point. So that said, this section here, where if you look at honor, it says, touching dead flesh anywhere other than at war, persuading another to act dishonorably is a breach of honor. And I'm like, I see what you're trying to say. You're trying to expand moral like ethics and whatnot to something that's not a Western idea of it. But you can't do it in 3 bullet points.
They also have seppuku in there. Refusing seppuku when required is a massive breach of
Yeah.
honor, which I hate.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little conflict there. They're trying to do something, but then they're also falling back on these Bushido stereotypes.
Also, like touching dead flesh anywhere other than war. Like, what about all the Crab Clan? What about the Crab Clan scientists?
Oh my god!
That we were talking
Seriously?
about, right?
Yeah.
What about
Or,
an
like,
investigator?
if-
What about the Falcon Clan, who are like spirit investigators, right?
Or if you
that's
want to
not
get
my-
like really sad, like what about a loved one on their deathbed? Like,
yeah,
what if someone dies in your arms? Like, it doesn't work.
it's
you
like
know?
I can't hold you as you die because it would be a minor breach of honor. Sorry,
My
Like,
honor score.
Ah!
Yeah.
right?
I think this could be more effectively conveyed in like a portion of this book that was about customs and rokugan and drew from those real world traditions and real world Asian perceptions of things like a dead body, things like spirits. I don't know if the Emerald Empire book does that. It'd be interesting to see, but the core book does not.
Monty or Sar, can you
Well,
elaborate?
the clan source books pick one of the tenets of Bushido and expands upon them. I think they add like a few pages worth, like describing it. I wrote the righteousness section in the Celestial Realms book, so people can go read that and judge whether or not I screwed that one up. But
Pulling it off my shelf.
yeah,
Hold on.
but yeah, it's each clan supplement book like focuses on one tenet that's supposed to expand upon the idea. Which again, I don't know if that means you need to buy 9 books in order to like fully understand Bushido to run this game. That's a different issue.
That's a new strategy for buying books. In order to understand this
Yeah.
outdated, romanticized image of samurai, buy
Yeah, I would
9
suggest-
supplements.
I would
Seriously.
suggest no one buy any more books and just play it as you want.
Yeah.
But also, all of my neighbors probably just heard me yell, my honor score.
Your neighbors are like, oh, she must have lost honor just now.
Oh,
Oh, man.
yeah.
But yeah.
I just like. It's interesting you say that, Jeremy, because like, oh, they could have done the research. I feel like they think they've done the research. That's the thing.
You might have it in another book, certainly not in this core.
No,
of the
I mean,
book.
even in this one, I still think many people believe that they've
Maybe.
done a lot of research,
But
and
it's
and that's not a flaw on their part. It's just a misunderstanding of what is a proper source.
I'm going to. I actually do have a lot to say about that, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. And I think this is completely indicative of academia and the cultural differences of what's important to different culture. What's like what sticks out to different cultures in academia. Like a Western person that reads Japanese history and reads Asian history will probably gloss over and will probably when like. As an Indonesian person, the word being called a crocodile or being called an alligator has significantly different context than for other Asian people being called a crocodile or an alligator. Because in Indonesia, there was this thing called the lobang buaya, which is called a crocodile hole, which was where back during the Indonesian Revolution, a resistance fighter, people that were fighting for the freedom fighters fighting for Indonesian independence was thrown into the well as a form of execution. That was called the alligator hole. So that does when people research that whole history and people are just they kept mentioning the alligator hole. For me, it's like I keep thinking about the history of that, and it has a deeper emotional connection to myself than another person would. Than somebody else who did not have that research and did not have that lens to see that event through. And
Yeah.
it's just something that I have noticed in not only in L5R, but also, researching different things in academia. Is like I pick up on the significance I can pick up on significant things on like significant layout and significance of like the paint that was used in a particular art piece or whatever that a Western person may just gloss over.
Yeah.
But it's also, I guess, in the TTRPG, in the context of a TTRPG, how do we apply that, right? How do we help people see that, or how do we teach that to them? And I think that's what Asians Represent is all about, right? Asians Represent is all about finding and identifying, nuance and teaching it to people so that they can go and make their own things, or they can go and evaluate games however they'd like. Like Jeremy, you said earlier, your perceptions of L5R are different now. And that's because you've learned from everyone else. You've learned from Sar's perspective, Monty's perspective, Emma's, Steve's, myself. Right? That's why these conversations are important. So we could teach people. We're not trying to prevent people from playing these games. We just want people to think a bit more when they're actually interacting with the game. That got really deep. Sorry.
I mean, why else are we here, right?
Right. I thought we were here for the Thin Mints, but
Well, then
I got some waiting for me after stream.
Yeah, you didn't bring enough for the class.
Okay. So this has become such an L5R thing in my head because you said you didn't bring it up for the class, and as you were saying that in my head, it autofilled to you didn't bring enough for the clan, and I was like, Emma. In my head, I was like, dishonor on you.
Shrimp clan.
Shrimp clan. I mean, at the end, we got to decide what clan, what our clan's going to be.
Yeah.
So let's.
The next page here, if we skip kind of like the individual breaches and sacrifices, moves on to status. And status is one page, and I'll be honest, I had no idea how to actually absorb this information. It seemed like something that would come into play much later on in a campaign, which, yeah, it belongs in this section. Just, I didn't know what to do with it.
Status?
Basically, status, honestly, it's a quick summary of status is basically your rank in the world. Whether or not are you just a common citizen? Are you a minor? Are you like a lousy warrior or Ronin? Are you like just a whatever? Are you a daimyo? Are you a governor? Are you a priest? All the way up to the emperor.
Think of status.
Yeah, has anyone ever rocked up and just said, "I'm the ruling emperor"?
Everybody roll Everybody roll a D100 right now and see what you're gonna get. Random number.
I'm not rolling this.
I don't have a way to roll.
52, city governor.
I don't have a D100.
I just. Well, you could roll Google has a dice roller, right?
Yeah, that's why I was actually I just realized that as some words was coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I'm not participating.
I don't know how to do this, and I'm not going to figure it out now.
But yeah, sorry, that makes a lot of sense. The only way I can kind of connect that is when Daniel plays with us in Dungeons and Asians. My character has some deference because of her status. So we get to talk to certain NPCs, and it's clear kind of who's come from like a legitimate like upbringing and who has status. But even then, that has wiggle room because some people just don't fucking care. Meanwhile, the individual levels of it that are outlined here really only matter in like very, very specific areas where everyone already knows everyone's name, as it were. And that can be fun. It absolutely can be. So this is like a good resource. Just as a first-time reader, you're just like, yeah, I don't get this.
Well, you know why the status is here, right? The status is here so that you can relate your status to the tenets of Bushido. So you know who is above you, who is below you,
right?
Who is your equal, and you know how you can act relative to another person within the context of Bushido. That's all this is here for. Also, I rolled.
You can murder without losing compassion.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So who can I murder? So I rolled a 52. So that would mean I'm a city governor, captain of military company, or a vassal family daimyo. So that means that I can't murder in cold blood anyone below. I can't murder a jade magistrate in cold blood without losing honor.
Oh boy. Okay.
Right, but that's why this is here. This is here to frame how you interact with the rest of the world, but not in a narrative sense, but in a sense but how it relates to Bushido and the loss of honor and glory. That's why this is here. Because yeah.
So if we move past status, move on to the alternate campaign styles, and this stuff,
I like this.
Without getting to detail, is dope as hell. And like, I wish it was earlier on. I was like, this is what I want.
But this is also where, for the first time, it clarified something, I think. It's been a while since we started.
Yeah.
But they said that in a standard or default play style, you're all notable political actors. I'm like, well, I didn't know that. So
I think it did say that. It did say that.
Did it? And I just was like, meh.
But it doesn't matter though. It doesn't matter though.
So to echo Emma's, it's like they said it, but they still use the word samurai, which is culturally loaded, right?
It implies a certain status.
So I mean, if your character was like a suave court person who has no idea how to use weapons and whatnot, you're samurai in Rokugan. But from like a historical meaning of the word samurai, people would have tension with you claiming that title.
Well, samurai is a catch-all in this for somebody of status.
And there would be a bunch, well, still, like, you could be a samurai but not be a notable political actor, you know?
That too, yeah.
Like,
yeah, but the implication is that, you know, samurai have a certain, I mean, also status is relative, I guess, but samurai have a certain social standing in historical Japan and, of course, Japanese media. I think that's also something to consider when we're thinking about this. But let's go through these alternative campaign styles.
I just wanted to actually just touch really briefly on the chart on page 305, status scores. I'm really not a fan of the idea of status in games in general, but in particular, like seeing, and I realize they're doing this, they're basing it on like Japanese history, and they're giving it out there for folks that, you know, might not have familiarity with these things, that really want to abide by it. But I really don't like the idea of kind of, you know, how we assign status to, you know, so-called higher ranks of people, and something like a merchant, an artisan, a laborer is somehow low status. That's tied into some harmful ideas that are perpetuated in society. And I know, like, personally, like, and this is a personal thing, like my parents to a certain extent were kind of obsessed with the idea of like rank and status. You know, I think a lot of immigrant families are that way. And, you know, why do so many Asian parents want their kids to go to so-called Ivy League schools? Status. You know, my mom, you know, when I told my mom that I liked trucks a lot as a kid, she told me that I couldn't become a truck driver because that's like a low status job. And so I'm reminded of some of these things when I think of this chart and I see actual things listed out in terms of numbers. And I would totally excise this from any game that I ran of L5R. I just don't like it.
Yeah. And really, this thing that they've set up, probably, like, other than, like Daniel said, to kind of create certain differentials that help with the mechanics and how they're applied. Otherwise, like, I don't think it's realistic, first of all. And then second, how many people are going to really use this? Like,
yeah, I know beginning GMs still getting versed in the system will probably put like a sticky thing on this page and then go back to it, be like, okay, you're talking to, who are you talking to now? Ooh, okay, got to figure out status score. And that's the sort of thing that I do not really think needs to be it needs to be broken down into metrics.
Or it's like, oh, you killed this person in cold blood, let's see what their status is.
So what I will add is that the idea of like the striations of social rank and whatnot, it is done a huge disjustice here. And in societies that really do understand this, there's so much nuance on it that can never, not in 1,000 years, be contained within a table. Like, there is a whole bunch of far-reaching reasons why those systems exist. Some good, some deplorable. And from a Western lens, which this book is clearly based around, this table right here completely just becomes racist. And it loses all the nuances and all the intricacies and all the complexities of like what a system like this does for a society, and ways it can benefit it and ways it can really damage it, and the ways that people have lived in that. So what this is missing is that whole lived in experience, and it shows.
So do you think that would make this racist, or do you think that this would just make it just like poorly designed and poorly conceived and absent of context. Because I think it's really important when we throw out the term racist. And I'm not defending it. I think it's more classist than anything.
Perhaps classist. I think there are racial elements to any sort of classist ranking. But I'd say first and foremost poorly designed. Secondly, kind of classist, and because this game talks about
and
Japan,
it's based on stereotypes.
There is some racial stereotypes at work here.
But I think it's more nuanced than it being racist. Yeah.
Oversimplified.
I think it's more nuanced than racist and both classes. I think there's an intersection there that is something that I actually can't talk to in much more detail. Like, this is kind of the limit I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, I think we've hit a point in the book where this is the kind of content that they shouldn't have put in here in the first place, just because it's so complicated. And honestly, they could have either left it to the player or the GM, or honestly, it should be the group to decide how they want to navigate status, right? And, how they want people to interact with one another. And they could say that this is certainly a stratified society. Societies of this scale are always going to be stratified. They're going to be stratified based on access to land, control over land, access to military. I don't want to go into archaeology and anthropology, but societies of this scale will always be stratified. And I think when you go into this game I don't think you go into this game thinking that Rokugan is an egalitarian society, because that wouldn't work. And so to put this much detail into something that is implied is honestly a waste and causes more problems.
Yeah.
But yeah. Shall we finish off with alternative campaign styles?
Yeah, I figure we'll talk about these alternative campaign styles and maybe highlight some art just towards the end here, because it's kind of cool.
The chapter 8 art?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty neat.
I feel like every time we do one of these episodes, we talk about alternative play styles, like what we would do instead.
Well, like, I would love, honestly, I want to know what you think your play style might be, Emma. Or what kind of story intrigues you?
Not being a notable political actor.
Yeah.
More realistic everyday life kind of stuff. And by realistic, I mean still a lot of supernatural things going on, but
so more like Rise from the Dust,
which
I don't know. I haven't read it yet. But
I don't know about that title,
so
but that's the whole idea, that it's not within.
So let's there's an interesting red sidebar text, but let's start with the introduction. The land of Rokugan is fertile, imaginative ground in which GMs and players can grow vivid stories. And not all of these tales are focused exclusively on noble samurai torn between the sworn duty, their role demands, and their inner desires. Such desperate Ronin and outlaws, inspired by literature such as The Water Margin, and the films of Akira Kurosawa, to groups of elite warriors protecting the whole of the Emerald Empire from supernatural threats. There are numerous other stories worth telling in the lands of the Legend of the Five Rings. This section describes a few alternate campaign styles you might want to explore, how to create characters for those games, and how these games can differ from our default play style and conventions. So the first one is Rise from the Dust. Instead of the samurai of the great clans and their intrigues and struggles, this playstyle focuses on the forgotten heroes and villains who live on the outskirts of society and struggle to survive in a dangerous world, while defending a village from bandits, fleeing the consequences of one's actions, or scraping together a few boo for one's next meal may not be the stuff of epic poems. It is just as harrowing for those who live it. And then I guess we should go to read the sidebar, which is Samurai as Foes. In this playstyle, samurai are potentially one of the largest dangers to the PCs. They might be allies during a given story. For many samurai have use of characters like the PCs. However, most samurai will be unlikely to risk their lives for the PCs and often view them as disposable. So assumptions of this playstyle. This sort of story hinges on the idea that the player characters are outsiders in the broad scope of society. They are not notable political actors, as the default playstyle assumes, and they are not likely to be given any political power they do not seize with their own hands. If they are samurai, they are likely forsaken or lost their titles and become Ronin, but they may also be merchants, ashigaru, peasants, and barakuman. As a result, the company is often much rougher than the high courts of the Emerald Empire. Courtesy is still important to some people, but being discourteous is only as dangerous as the person you have chosen to insult. Okay.
I like the idea of not being
A
in
samurai.
like, the whole court life and samurai setup, but I don't know why it automatically means you have to be a bunch of rough jerks. Like,
yeah, I don't.
That seems unlikely.
I don't like. I agree with that, and I don't like how they said you have to be outsiders in the broad scope of society,
and that like life is super struggle.
Yeah, and that's to say that peasants and merchants are just like not a part of the core of society. When
they also they ignore a lot of history, but it ignores that a lot of merchants, peasants, and artisans.
Yep.
A lot of them lived a lot better than samurai did.
Yep.
I would love to do an L5R campaign where I just want to play as a ceramicist. I just want to make pots.
Oh, there is a class.
Ooh.
There is a class.
Okay, you have my attention.
It is in the Courts of Stone. It's a phoenix. They are the Shiba artisan. They are considered to be one of the greatest artisans outside of grain clans.
Oh,
I like that. I like that. I also have this idea of like, if I was like an artist, I would want to be in the crab clan or live in crab lands, but the best clay or the best materials are always found on the other side of the wall. So I always sneak over to go get them. Get into mischief.
There's some interesting things in the character creation alteration sections. Like you got to choose which clan's lands did your character grow up in, and you choose a past instead of like a beauty.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool, but like they don't give you really much advice on how to do this. You're basically changing what this game was designed to do, and it's telling you to kind of chuck away large portions of what we just spent most of our time reading
or ignore
through.
parts of it.
pages.
Yeah, or ignore parts of it.
It's lazy. I don't know if Path of Waves does this better. I feel like this might be something that would be discussed in another supplement book. This really reminds me of like the 5th edition like DM toolkit section in the back, which is all a bunch of like random rules that you can be like, try this if you want. It might not work, but give it a try. These are failed concepts from the D&D Next playtest, but give them a try.
Do you mean like the optional honor score? In
optional
the
honor
Master's
score,
Guide?
like all that stuff.
This Rise from Dust thing is literally the skeleton, including these questions of Path of Waves. Path of Waves, like as if they took this and then just expanded it, or they probably did.
Path of Waves sounds like a better book because everybody's like, just read Path of Waves.
Like there's something telling about the fact that this one alternative playstyle resonates more with us as a cast than the rest of the 300 pages.
Yeah.
It's like,
this isn't the default. So like what? Yeah. Also, the first thing I thought when I read samurai as foes, I was like, isn't that just the entire game?
That's the whole game.
Like, who is a samurai going to have as an enemy other than another samurai?
I think they're assuming that you're playing as like ruffians and like you come across samurai and they might kill you on the spot. Like that's this smells to me of like the evil campaign. Like,
I was going to say D&D. West Side Story. But
West Side Story.
Yeah. Like West Side
snapping at each other.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Rokugan musical where they'd all just start with them snapping at each other and then dancing.
Or like this could be like
a dance clan
warriors. It could be like warriors and be like samurai come out to play. I think that'd also be a good one too. Oh, what a great movie.
I got a copy of Summon of Kings. We could be rapping samurai. We could just hack the crap out of this and figure it out.
Samurai Champloo. There you go.
Samurai
There you
Champloo,
go.
exactly.
Yeah.
Do it for dumplings.
A good soundtrack if to an L5R game. Honestly, I've thought about using. If I ever run an L5R game, it'll probably have Samurai Champloo as the background music.
I love that anime. It's so good.
Yeah.
It is really good. But moving on.
Yeah.
So that one was obviously like a very intriguing one pager.
Yeah.
But this
really-
one pager could have just been. There's stuff here that's just like, there's potential. There's potential.
Yeah.
Let's be positive. There's.
For a one page, it's really good, but it really needed to be more, considering we had already spent 300 pages getting here. But that said, moving on, there are two more alternative playstyles. First one is Fate of the Realm. So Fate of the Realm, the assumption is the playstyle assumes that the player characters are samurai who are tasked with dealing with a suitable epic problem or series of problems that threaten multiple clans and perhaps even the empire itself. Dangers such as massive Shadowland armies, Bloodspeaker sects, lunar cultists, that's weird, and other more insidious threats create story opportunities for characters to undertake epic story opportunities for characters to undertake epic quests to protect their homes and loved ones. This playstyle mirrors more classic fantasy adventures of great deeds, mighty heroes, and dire foes to be vanquished. There are numerous locations in Rokugan where this type of campaign fits, such as the Shadowlands, the Festering Pit of Fulong, the Shinomin Forest, and untamed wildland within the Empire itself. Even within smaller patches of the wild, there are strange and dangerous things. Not all spirits are friendly to humans, and some see the expansion of towns as the wildlands as an affront to nature. The PCs might need to compromise between ancient forces and humanity so that both can survive and thrive.
I thought that was what L5R already was, but
I thought it was too. Then I realized that no, you're meant to have like court drama, duels, like Asians looking at other Asians,
but
and
then like the
breaking their masks
Shugenja
and stuff like that.
the Phoenix Clan and the
but
Taint,
ultimately,
the
ultimately
Shadowlands.
the supernatural stuff in 5th edition L5R at least is more in the back. Like it's not like it's there if you want it, but and I certainly gravitate more towards this play style, I suppose, but it's not like the core game so much.
Yeah. And I find it a little odd that they just dabble in the whole blood magic, lunar cultists,
The
and
lunar
all of
cultist.
What is that supposed?
Yeah.
Is that supposed to be
I had to
Chinese
do-
people?
They
I had to
explain
do
it
it
No,
later.
that's an actual L5R thing that's supposed to come later.
They do
like after.
elaborate a little in, I think, the NPC chapter, but like not enough. And I feel like this, like the blood cult stuff and the lunar cultists have a deeper, not pleasant history within L5R.
I had to do a write-up for a lunar cultist in I think it was in Celestial
Cult of the Dead
Realms.
Moon.
And I have to admit, I was so confused. The fact that they okayed my write-up, I don't know, and I had no idea what I was doing. I'm like, I don't understand this at all.
Were you like, wait, no, give it back.
Sorry, please educate me on this because I'm
Yeah,
so
I'm
confused.
trying to go on the wiki to look at this
Are
stuff.
they aliens? Is that what the idea is?
There's two versions of the Cult of the Moon. Okay, there's two versions of the lunar cultist. The first version is the one that the Amaterasu Nokami is supposed to be is the sun goddess, and she's the one that supplied jade. But hey, obsidian also exists in the world, and the obsidian is the blood of Lord Moon. So instead of worshiping Lady Sun, these people worship Lord Moon. Now that's considered heretical in parts of Rokugan, but that's it is. Then fast forward to 2 apocalypses from now, because that's how many apocalypses happened before this cult actually sprung up. Lord Moon is dead now. And there's this cult that worships him and is trying to resurrect Lord Moon. So that's the 2 lunar cultists.
Okay.
Okay.
So they just took like Tsukuyomi and just threw him out the window, and we're like, you know what? We got another guy for the moon.
No, basically they actually said, Tsukuyomi, we're gonna do bad stuff to the moon god, so you take a timeout and we'll just create this thing called Onotangu.
Yeah.
I gotta play some
Get outta
Tsukuyomi
here, you're not
on
evil
Smite
enough.
later.
No.
You mean anti-mage?
play anti-mage. I mean, I all the characters I pick, everyone hates.
Yeah, you pick the worst, most annoying characters.
I used to play as when I played Smite. I think I used to play as Zhonghui like all the time.
Oh yeah.
I don't think anyone plays as
Spin.
him really, but I loved him. I had the I wanted to get the Ghostbusters skin, and yeah,
A whole bunch of us are playing on the server now.
Yeah.
My MOBA days are done. I'm afraid.
I try my best to like
Come
try
on.
all the
My MOBA
different
days are
gods
done.
in Smite and just like really have a vast
That's
diversity.
a lie. That's a lie.
Yeah, right.
That's a
It's
lie,
a complete
Steve.
lie.
Steve
I'm
only
playing
plays as
100%
Mulan.
100%
100% Mulan.
Oh, speaking of Mulan,
Oh,
I don't
no.
know
Oh,
if
don't you
anyone
dare.
else. No. I don't know if anyone else here plays Civilization 6 besides me, which
I
is
have.
like
I've dabbled.
I
in it.
have it, but no.
I am like the Civilization super fan. So they recently added a new DLC. The November DLC dropped recently, and it added Hammurabi as a leader. But
Nice.
the big one is they have this one called Heroes and Legends, and a couple of the heroes and legends, like one of the heroes is Sun Wukong.
Really?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
another of the hero is Mulan.
I gotta look at the art.
That's interesting
what I'm
to
always-
lead a civilization. That's an interesting choice.
They're not leaders of civilization.
They're
They're heroes or legends that you
Oh.
can recruit, and they will
Oh,
actually
and they can
fight
like
for
they can go to your
civilization.
your buildings and stuff.
They can go to your civilization, and once a hero is recruited by that civilization, no other civilization can recruit it.
I kind of like how, at least in the art that I found, Mulan has a helmet.
Yes.
I prefer my Mulan to have long flowing hair on horseback to just like whip into the face so that she may
Kick
jump off her
spears?
horse and kick a spear back into someone's chest.
Fuck that movie. Fuck that movie. This movie's so bad. Almost want to do like.
That's actually really cool because
Yeah, I like
I
it.
love the idea that stories can change the face of the planet.
I like how
Like, that is powerful.
one of her abilities is Mulan's defiance. Mulan fully fortifies automatically at the end of every turn. That's hella good.
Yes.
That's hella good in this
That is
game.
hella good.
Yeah, they
That's
have
cool.
quite a few. They have an interesting selection. They have like Himiko, Beowulf, a whole bunch of interesting
Also, her like
characters.
her.
They have Anasazi
Gee.
too.
Lucifer. Is there a Lucifer?
Oh,
I
she's
don't
an
know. I haven't recruited all of them, but I know King Arthur. I was playing as Japan. I
Yeah,
recruited
King Arthur. Is in there.
That's neat.
It's good.
Himiko is interesting. That's an interesting choice.
But moving on here, just home stretch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting
There's
distracted.
one more.
There's
There's
one
one more
more.
alternative play style, and it's the Nimura Nai, which means unsleeping in reference to the object's kami.
No, I think
So in
these are.
I think this is just
a part of Fate of
This
the
is
Realm.
part
Steve.
of Fate of the Realm.
Is it actually?
Yeah, look
Yeah.
I
at
thought it was
look
completely
at-
different.
No, but look at the
No.
way the type is stratified on the page.
Oh, okay.
It's a
These
word.
these are basically your magic items if
Yeah.
you want to
But,
play a
like-
Fate of the Realm campaign.
I don't know why this is specific to Fate of the Realm.
Me neither.
No,
That's why
I
I was so
know.
confused.
No, this is
Nimura
Fate of the
Nai
Realm.
is
thing.
an interesting idea, which
is-
actually kind of, in some ways, meshes with Japanese folk stories about
Yeah.
like objects having essence and life force, particularly the older they are and the more cared for or used they've been.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're just like, here it is, Nimura Nai.
They're literally
Yeah.
they're literally the four nobles in our Dungeons and Asians campaign. Our Dungeons and Asians campaign is a Fate of the Realms. adventure.
But notice how you didn't give us those fated items off the bat.
No, I
'Cause we're
made
going
you.
to
I
go through
made
a
you. I
journey.
made you slave over them and think about them, and wonder what they are.
Yeah, so we went on a journey for them because
Yeah.
you know, in a typical story like this, the journey matters the most. And we could frame it in many frames, the Western one being the hero's journey, but all cultures have this idea that heroes go through a specific journey and it makes them better coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in the
Yeah.
context of an
So
RPG, it
kind
gives
of
you-
get so like giving them the item up front is an odd choice. It's not a wrong choice, but it's odd.
Well, what if you hid the item in plain sight? What if the
Or
item
you're
wasn't?
like She-Ra and you have it, but you don't know how to
Yeah.
use it.
And She-Ra is fantastic.
But in the text here, it says that your magic weapon immediately has +2 deadliness. But we know that in these examples like She-Ra, the sword wasn't +2 deadly. The sword was basically a club,
Yeah.
right?
The sword
Which
is like
was
plus
which,
2 feet in height.
which was
Plus two burden.
which was compelling because the burden, like the clumsiness, was an allegory for emotions, right? And like that is very, very compelling and great for a kid's show.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, there are things you could do if you had this power weapon at the very beginning.
Mhm.
You could limit its uses, or the use of this power weapon draws a lot of attention to you.
Or I could actually, if I was going to run it, it does have like, you know, it is giving 3 different things. I would just have each like thing unlock at like different levels, at like different parts of the narrative. And also, it's also kind of interesting that they gave us a weapon, an armor, and an item, which kind of reminds me of the sword, the mirror, and the gem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess. Amaterasu.
With the KG, if it flickers with flame when evil magic is nearby. Like, if you don't have it drawn, do you just set your own pants on fire?
It would actually,
Yes.
well, your scabbard would get very hot.
Okay. It's just like, oh no, evil's nearby.
Ah!
Pants on fire. Well,
Emma, I like you. You like you
everyone's,
ask
no
the
one's gonna
important
believe you.
questions here.
well,
this
Emma,
is
if
what
that
you have
happens,
me
no
here
one's going
for.
to believe you when you say evil's nearby because your pants is on fire.
Like, yeah,
Oh God,
can't deny it. All right.
that's
Okay.
funny. Okay, so let's end by talking about art.
Yeah.
Steve wanted to talk about art, and I really like the art on the Chapter 8 sort of title
Yeah.
page.
Yeah, we'll start there. Yeah, 'cause this is really
it's
cool.
I think it just looks cool.
Yeah, he's not a card yet. As far as I know, only like very few art in this chapters are actual cards.
Got a lot of extra teeth that shouldn't be there, but I'm not gonna nitpick that. Yeah, I like that art. That's like a mini I would want to paint. And then we're gonna skip NPCs just because it's NPCs. We've talked about our previous streams how I really like the layout of the stats. I think it looks beautiful. I think it looks cool.
Yes. And it's very effective in that for a very little space, we really convey a lot of information.
Exactly.
Stat blocks.
That's
yeah.
great.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to go to page 320 for the goblin. I think it's a goblin. It might be the Oni, but I think it's the goblin.
I think it's the goblin is on page 321 and the Oni is the one on the bottom of page 320.
320 is
so?
Oni.
320 is the Oni, and
I went to page 319. That's Bog Hag.
Boghead.
321.
I skipped over
321 is
that.
the Forest Troll.
Okay, so there's no goblin here.
Okay.
There's no
I wanna-
goblin.
Yeah, that one's
Re-
definitely an Oni on 320.
Oh, that's a
Re-
forest troll. On
Okay. Zombie
Yeah.
peasant.
Actually, those two are cards. The top one, the Sinister Oni is Marauding Oni in the game, and Forest Troll is Volcanic Troll in the game.
Oh, that's very different.
Yeah. So they just this is like the tabletop game version of palette swapping.
Oh, there's a little cat on
There's
page
a little cat.
325.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious that they're like NPCs include like pets, so that's like
Yeah.
cats, dogs.
Oh, remember, some characters can't have pets, including cats.
Can I have a cat, Arby?
Does it affect my honor?
Well, actually, that did come up.
Oh my god.
Oh,
What?
Sorry, you're killing me. You're killing me.
Oh no!
Would you? The cat does not. The character knows that the cat was incredibly finicky, and that nobody else can pet the cat except for her. Otherwise, the cat's going to attack. This magistrate insists on petting the cat. The cat scratched the magistrate.
I don't.
So, what the? Cool.
Guys,
Cool.
Cool. So
Alright.
I made the mistake of going to page 332, the educational and inspirational works. And I think we talked about this before, but I'm
We
getting
already
like,
did, yeah.
I'm just getting bad flashbacks to that. And when we read it, the inspiration in Kindred of the East, but I totally forgot that they put the Great Wall as inspiration
Remember,
here.
Great
Yeah,
Wall's
we talked about
better
that.
than Mulan.
And
technically.
Marco Polo. I
Technically
forgot.
better than Mulan.
Oh, way better than Mulan.
Still better than Mulan.
So I would actually I wanted to pause here because that picture is clearly Kirin. that is in the text here, which is different than a unicorn.
Yes.
Yep.
That's
But the
not even
fact
the
that,
Kirin,
like-
actually.
That's not the Kirin?
That's not the Kirin.
Are you
Yeah, that doesn't look like
Yeah,
a
no,
cat.
I don't
What's
think
it
that's
supposed
meant
to be
the
then?
Kirin. I think
That
it's just
is
meant to be
Aranat, one of the children of literally Lady Shinjo.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It looks like an Irish
Okay.
elk.
Are Kirin really just unicorn in this game?
No, they literally are Kirin, but there hasn't been a solid depiction of what the Kirin looks like in LCG L5R.
That's so bizarre to me because it's kind of like it is a very clear imagery for what it could be for multiple cultures. Like, yes, it varies between like Vietnamese, Japanese, and Chinese, and so on and so forth. But there are clear depictions of it in historical art. So it wouldn't be hard to take that and extend it and go on a tangent to one that would fit Rokugan.
And like
But to shy away from
the
it
lore
is
is cool too.
Here's the thing. Here's the reason why I don't want to say that this is a Kirin, although it's very possible that this is a Kirin, or we just haven't gotten that confirmation in an official LCG lore yet. Because if this is indeed a Kirin, we know that eventually in the story this thing's gonna die, because they are gonna kill the last Kirin eventually in L5R.
Oh, cool.
Great.
And that's something I read in the Kirin section when they're like, if you fight this thing, I'm like, why would you ever fight Kirin? Like,
But that's the thing. That's the like anything that is not a like a human character or anything that isn't a protagonist or obviously like an NPC that serves a purpose for the characters is seen as something that can potentially be an adversary. And like I always go back to this example, Steve, and like if you don't like me doing that, like please let me know.
I shared it for a very specific reason because I think it's a great learning opportunity.
Yeah. So like on episode 7 or 8 of Dungeons and Asians, the characters were going into this forest called the Shadewood, and I was giving a very detailed description of the scene, and I spent a lot of time providing details on these birds. They were gen birds from Chinese folklore, and they're very beautiful, and I was describing them, and Steve, as a player, sized them up as if I was trying to set up a combat encounter, which I had zero interest in doing. And then so nothing came of this description of these birds because everybody thought that I was setting up for a fight because I was describing nature.
Yep.
And that's the problem with taking principles of D&D and taking principles of European role-playing games and taking them to Asia, where the relationship between the known and unknown is very different. Monsters aren't representations of theological virtues. Monsters are just the unknown. Even calling them a monster might be incorrect in many cases because a monster implies that they are supposed to be at odds with humanity. They're just strange creatures, different. Right?
well, and for Kirin in particular, like I think the details of what they look like changed when they came into Japan, but the general idea that the appearance of a Kirin indicates something momentous has happened or is going to happen. Like they're a symbol of an event.
Yes.
Like they don't just exist and they don't like mess around with you. Like they are a herald of sorts of significant things.
Yeah.
So like you're not gonna bomb into the woods and be like, you go after it. And it's also not the type of creature I don't think that will come after you. Like
Yeah.
I think even in the description they're like, it speaks languages. Like this thing talks or at least understands
So
everything being said. Like
when I did Denizens of Mountains and Seas, my 2 monster zines for Chinese mythology, like I specifically wrote a couple of creatures that didn't have stats because I didn't want people to use them in combat, and I provided some context as to why there are no stats because of A, how they are revered, or B, because of just their role in nature. And I think games and game designers tend to take the approach, especially in more trad games like D&D, where they have to stat everything out.
Yep.
Yeah, like if you work for Wizards and you want to describe a creature, you have to stat it out. Everything you put in the game has to be statted out. and I hate doing that. It was my least favorite part of writing for Wizards, from a structural perspective.
Yeah. Nothing to add on Kirin. I'm ready to move on to one other point here, unless Monty, Jeremy, anything to add on this?
And we got to remember that Monty has a hard stop in 25 minutes.
Gotcha. The one thing I wanted to add here was that looking at the educational inspirational works here, I don't see, for everything that L5R tries to tout as being a Pan-Asian type setting, I don't see a Pan-Asian representation within the inspirations. And that is unsurprising, yet still disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, like the majority of having the chrysanthemum and the sword is a problem in its own right. But the majority of their scholarly works are done by white scholars, are works by white scholars of Japan. If you look at their if you look at their primary sources translated, I don't know why. Like, I get that they're doing it in alphabetical order, but like they have Romance of the Three Kingdoms and The Art of War, which are Chinese. If you look at animation, film, and manga, like 13 Assassins, totally get. But the thing is, if you watch 13, have any of you seen 13 Assassins as the movie?
Not in 13 Ghosts.
Matthew Lillard. No. 13 Assassins is an incredible movie, and there's an incredible fight scene at the end of that movie. But 13 Assassins is not the L5R we just read. 13 Assassins is honestly, thematically, and like from the characters and everything, and aesthetically, it is that like they called it Rise from the Dust. Like, it is dark and gritty and violent, and it really doesn't involve the court as much. We look at like the Great Wall. The Great Wall is not L5R. Mm-hmm. The Great Wall is that like the fate of the realm sort of thing.
I think this is meant to be educational and inspirational works only as far as like, here's things that somebody, basically a white person, can probably digest in order to gain an idea of kind of like the quasi-Asian Japanese vibe that this game has. This is better than what you guys read when you were looking at Kindred of the East, where they were like recommending Ghost of the Shell and stuff like that. But it's in that same branch of recommendation. It's like, here's a few things that inspired us, and there's inconsistencies here.
Like, when I look at this and I see Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and I see Hero, having gone through doing that wuxia episode of the podcast, I'm like, those don't apply here. I think
not specifying that these represent different regions and different cultures and time periods is problematic. I think I pointed this out before, that they don't even put any dates with their publications, and that's a huge part of context.
Yeah.
I also just noticed Samurai and Ninja by Anthony Cummins is on there. Yeah. And the full title of that is The Real Story Behind the Japanese Warrior Myth That Shatters the Bushido Mystique. So the whole point of that book is that their concept of
Bushido's wrong.
Samurai and Bushido that's presented in this game is a myth. And it's actually like a really easy to read, accessible resource for anyone who's like, why do people have problems with samurai and the term Bushido? That's why. And like, yeah, white author, but like, it's a really good, easy to read rundown on why things like L5R, representations of samurai and Bushido, could be a problem. So it's kind of funny to put in there.
Yeah,
I will say I am impressed that they put Thunderbolt Fantasy under animation, film, and manga, because that is a Taiwanese and Japanese show basically done with puppets, and it ties into the kind of traditional art of Taiwanese puppetry, where you have like these wuxia characters all represented by little puppets. And so I'm impressed that they put it on there, but it's just one kind of unique little gem.
Yeah,
it might be on Netflix. Yeah. I haven't actually watched it, but I've seen, in Taiwan, those shows are still huge, and they're all in like Taiwanese, not Mandarin or anything like that. And I'm impressed that they actually put it on there.
Also,
but I have a feeling they just put it on here because maybe it's on Netflix now, or I think it's on Crunchyroll. Like these are like their idea of like kind of accessible things that you could, like, someone in a Western country might be able to find.
Yeah,
and I think that confirms kind of my fear here, where they weren't actually influenced in the text. They were influences to signal that you are so cultured. within this East Asian type idea, and that's a yikes for me.
Yeah.
I have had words about things things like this, which I always felt is just trying to be the nicest way I can say it is lazy.
Yeah.
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 Like this is page 1 of Google results when you type in like Asian.
Not even with a capital, just like Asian.
Yeah.
No, it's not even spelled out. It's just AZN.
Yeah.
I feel like if you
Or
type AZN,
samurai.
it's got a direct to our stuff.
Good.
Which would be helpful.
Fucking good.
It should.
L5R 6E. Fucking inspiration. Asians represent.
Asians represent. That'd be
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So-
no, and like I'm coming from, well, a bunch of us are coming from disciplines and work where you cite your sources or else you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And this like blows my mind that they're just like inspirations.
I put citations in all of my zines.
I think
sources.
like D&D has a better like inspiration source reading thing at the end of its I think Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. Like they have a thing. They have a thing where they list out, books on storytelling, basically.
Yeah, I was about to say because D&D is more setting agnostic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they actually, I think they properly cite everything as well, like properly have it laid out and like as you would at the end of like a paper.
Yeah.
But here it's just names of stuff.
Yeah. I want a full citation though. Also, like for some of these, like the translations. So you might think like translations, they just are put into another language, but the translation process is subject to context of the person doing the translating, not just the original text or who it's being translated for, but the time it's being done and what that person thinks is important. So like, I want to know what translations are being used. Like, give me the full proper citation.
Right.
Like, I know I'm an academic, but like, give me the full citation.
And Emma, you're 100% right, because depending on, it's like I can read the same book in two different edition, two different translation, and I could get two completely different meanings from it.
Completely different.
Exactly. It's kind of like I don't know if anyone else here follows any H.P. Lovecraft stuff.
I do.
It's like
No,
the
really.
kind of like the whole story behind the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
It's like there's like 4 different translations officially in the H.P. Lovecraft lore, and only one of them's the true translation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 Actually, in my Delta Green game, we found the Necronomicon.
Oh, did you guys open it and read it?
Which one have you lost your mind?
One of the characters went insane
There you go.
and ended up dying. He got killed by a Shoggoth.
Shoggoth, yeah.
Yeah, Shoggoth.
See, I don't know what those things are, so he was describing it, and everybody was like, "Whoa!" And I was like, "What's going on?"
Unless
Unless
it's a demon in your fruit cellar, I don't care.
Yeah, I was
demon
like,
in the fruit cellar.
I'm in that game. I'm suspicious of everyone. So, but we gotta end this.
Let's end this. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I know. Well,
I feel like we personally wanted to drag it a little bit because y'all.
Yeah, I love this. But here's the thing. This isn't the end of us chatting about this stuff. This conversation has to continue. The conversations about Asian representation, the conversations about citations, the conversations about, respectful art and understanding the nuances of cultures that you are trying to incorporate into your games, the mutual respect we all have for one another despite disagreements that we might have on these subject matters, that like these kinds of conversations and the way we conduct ourselves, that needs to happen in the wider gaming industry. Right now, we don't see as much of that. And I think that it's really important that, we had 40 hours of on-air conversation where we critically deconstructed a game. And I think one of the things we have to do when we finish up is I think we need to give an initial verdict based on, but I'll say it this way because people will comment. Based on just this text, nothing else. And who wants to go first?
Based on just this.
Oh, Steve. Yeah, just this text.
To hang a show by now, if you ever ask for a volunteer, I'm 100% the first volunteer.
I know.
Whether it's that has landed me in so much hot water where I'm like, I need a volunteer, and like I'm already volunteering, and I have yet to hear what the task is, and it has landed both me and like facilitator in trouble because they're like, so what do you know about this? And I'm like, zero. I know zero.
I know zero,
like, well,
but I got this book here that I can read through. Yeah. So Steve, what are your thoughts?
So I have two thoughts. One is on the text itself, and one is towards the fan base who've interacted quite a bit with me, and I'm actually quite thankful for that. Mm-hmm. First thought, I don't want to play L5R. Even I feel like we've said a lot, like SAR, if you were to run an L5R game, like it'd be really, really cool. And I don't disagree with that. I think it'd be dope as fuck. But I have yet to read anything in 300 pages to be like, I would really get a lot of value out of playing this game, because I have so many other games in my life that are so valuable and tell such enriching stories. And L5R has yet to do a good job of telling me what stories would be really, really compelling here. If you were to say that this is a game about sea dramas, it's a game just about sea dramas, and we're gonna wear fancy ass clothes, and we're gonna be in a court, and we're just gonna stare at each other for like 2 hours.
Play a different game.
I would be in. I would be fucking in. But it's not. This is a game about everything that is kind of Japanese, but also not. And it's not for me. That said, I come to point two, and that is to all the L5R fans out there. Amar actually wrote this, quoted me on this tweet a lot, which I thought was a throwaway tweet. But Amar really resonated with it, and as Amar has talked about it more on the Elkadim stream, I'm realizing that I was saying something very nuanced here. And it is just because the text and the media you love is generally pretty racially insensitive, it doesn't mean you loving it makes you racially insensitive. It doesn't make you a racist. What it means is you have a capacity for loving stories of people of color. So for all the L5R fans who have been with us for this journey, I want to say, embrace that capacity, because there's a lot that you can do with it. And all you need to do is open those doors and talk to more people of color. And that's my take.
That's a good one.
Very good.
Anybody want to go next, or I can?
I guess mine will be short.
Or if you want to go ahead.
I think, in summary, it's been said a bunch of times that there are things that interested in us, but the overall mechanics described and laid out in this book are not what we would follow. So it's like, I would play this game if, or I would play this version, but leave that out. Or if I did this, I would. Like, there's a lot of that. And so I would totally play a game of L5R, but only with like everyone here, because we've gone through 40 hours of talking about it already. Only with clear standards of what is acceptable and what isn't. Only with people who understand that this isn't a true representation of any East Asian culture, let alone Japanese culture and history. But yeah, I don't know. Based on the book alone, I would probably open and go, oh, close it.
Yep.
And not seek out an L5R group to give it a try, you know?
Yeah. For me, the art got me to buy it. So I own a physical copy of the beginner box, which I actually haven't opened. Yeah. For me, I think, like, I really, if we hadn't read L5R, I am pretty certain that I would not have met Usar. And for that, I am very grateful. I figured that I would have met Jeremy and Monty because of the wider RPG circle, but I don't think I would have interacted with you or met you, Sar, if we hadn't done L5R. So for that, I'm super grateful because I've learned so much from you, Sar. And like, I'm so happy that like people like you, Monty, are actually writing for L5R and are still writing for L5R, and that gives me so much hope. But again, those are
this
for
is
books.
like a little Thanksgiving thing.
Yeah, but again, those are for books that aren't the core book, right? What's the celestial one? Celestial
Realms.
Thank you. Celestial Realms. I was gonna say Celestial Waves, but I was like, no, that's Path of Waves. But like all of these books that are recommended to us by the L5R community that have interacted with us are not the books that we've just read. That is not the book we've read. So for me, I'm of the mind that I'll play it. I'll play L5R. I'll give it a shot. But it's going to be with people I know. It's not going to be with random people. For the exact same reasons you talked about, Emma. Right? Is this a good game? Is this a bad game? I mean, my opinion honestly doesn't matter. If L5R brings you and your friends together to tell a story that doesn't preach hate against other people, incite violence against a real group of people in real life, play L5R. I'm not here to tell you not to, right? I think L5R can be a good game if that's what you think it is. But what L5R is not is a good representation of Asian culture. And that's my verdict. L5R can be a good game. It's not for me because I fucking hate custom dice. I don't like custom dice because for me, I find it really harder. It's harder for me to learn. That's just how my brain works. Custom dice don't vibe with me. So L5R can be, if L5R is a great game to you, keep playing L5R. Just know that L5R is not a great representation of Asian cultures. And even if L5R got you to learn more about Asian cultures in an ethical way, not just going to festivals like the book tells you to do,
Or reading
poetry, still does not make L5R a good representation of Asian culture if it got you to be interested in Japan. Okay, so keep those two separate, and you're good. Who wants to go next?
I mean, I'll oh, you want to go, Sar?
Why don't you go?
I mean, I pretty much agree with what you guys have said. Interestingly enough, when I first encountered L5R, I really liked it. I did have a very positive experience with the beginner's box, and I was very starved for like a game that did Asian culture and Asian, history well. And my experience with the beginner's box was positive, and so I was like, this is a 5 out of 5 game. But after having played a little bit more since then, I thought it was maybe more of like a 4 out of 5. Now, after having spent all this time with you guys, I think it's maybe a 3.5 taints out of 5 taints at most. and that could kind of, it could maybe go to 4 or even lower to like 3 or 2, depending on who I played it with. But I think with you guys, if it was like a Crab Clan campaign on the wall or like a Mantis campaign at sea, I think it would be, 4 taints. But
4 out of 4 taints.
Are you trying to increase the taint exposure, or are you trying to decrease it?
I think I'm trying to increase the taint.
So it's taint.
4 taint.
Taint is good then. 4 taint.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to clarify.
Taint can be good.
Yeah. So Jeremy's rating is somewhere between 1 to 4 out of 4 taints.
No, 1 to 4 out of 5 taints.
4 to 5 taints. Sorry. Okay, how about
I'd like to go next.
Monty? Go ahead.
Yeah. So, as a freelancer, my first priority, of course, is the client takes priority, and so
yeah.
But I do have to admit, when I take on these assignments for L5R, I do have that additional level of awareness of like what I'm writing. This is also the fact that it's kind of based on Japanese culture, and I'm not Japanese either. So my goal, whenever I take on any kind of assignment, is try to find the best in the material, focus on that, amplify that, definitely de-amplify not so good. I'd like to think that the stuff I've written, has some nuance. I've made the characters as human as I possibly can. Some of the characters I've written are dumbasses. Some of them, may adhere to like honor, but a very, different idea of it. But also that like there's some senses of humor. Like I have characters that are goofing off and like trying not to be the stern Asian stereotype. And of course I have to throw in a reference to Daikon because I think it's funny.
That's amazing.
Respect. Yeah.
Okay, so Sar, the last
yeah, Sar,
one.
would you play a game of L5R?
I'll be okay. So I'm last, and okay, fine. If this was my introduction to L5R, if I had lived my life not knowing anything about L5R until this point, and I picked up 5th edition L5R and I started reading it, I put it back down and I wouldn't pick it back up again.
Damn.
That's me, and I'm looking right now at every single L5R book ever printed, and to my right is every single L5R card by FFG ever printed, including promos.
Wow.
So, yeah, I wouldn't, because this is not. I would not pick up 5th edition L5R because I think for a new player, it doesn't show Rokugan very well. It doesn't show the world that I love very well. It tries to fix a lot of the things that went wrong, but it always just seems to fall short. Whether it's by inability or by pure laziness, I don't know. But at this point, I will try to get people to play L5R. I will try to explain all the nuances about L5R, about why I love it so much. Now, even knowing all the things that I know about it, but at the same time, it's like, if you are, how can I say this really? If you are willing to take the risk, try it out.
Yeah. And look, like a lot of these other books, I feel like this would be completely different if we were talking about Path of Waves. If we had read Path of Waves, I'd be like, huh. For me, it's like, sorry, if you ever asked, you were like, yo, Daniel, you want to play L5R? I'd be like, let's do this. Put me on that wall right now. Like, I'm there, right? But yeah, I think what you're trying to say is that the core book is not a good representation of L5R as a whole.
It's not.
L5R is a game divorced of its problematic Asian stereotypes and representations. Like, if you like L5R for just this fantasy world that's kind of Asia, I feel like the 5th edition core rulebook is a really bad representation of that because the world building is so poorly done in this book. Because I feel like they've put a lot more effort, and writers like Monty have put so much more effort into fleshing out that world. And if you're already in it, if you're already deep into the L5R like community like you are, Sar, I totally get it. And I think the biggest disadvantage of this core book is that for the most part, it's people's entry point into L5R, and it's a poor entry point.
Exactly. The beginner box, I think, did a little bit better, but
it does.
You can't pop open the beginner box and flip through the pages.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, honestly, if you could just take the beginner box and just flip through the pages, I think that would be a much better introduction to L5R rather than the 5th edition core rulebook.
Sorry, Steve said something really offensive to me in the chat.
Yeah, I also just saw that.
And for people watching on YouTube, Steve said, Scorpion is just a superior crab design, and that is false.
I will take no questions at this time.
Actually, I'm sorry, Daniel. So the first efficient Dishonored deck was a crab deck. The second and current most efficient Dishonored deck is a Scorpion deck.
Yes.
if you're in the chat, just tell us what clan you'd want to be. And I'm gonna say that to everybody. You know what? Let's put this to a poll.
Oh God.
So I think as Daniel kind of puts that poll and stuff, I know we're running out of time here, but this has been a really, really great experience and stuff. Monty, you got to get going very shortly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think we'll end here. Just Monty, any last thoughts on this 40-hour journey?
3-minute
You've
poll
kind of been with
going
us?
up now.
Knowing that I know you're under NDAs and stuff, so you're kind of hamstrung a tiny bit and being very open here. But any thoughts you'd be comfortable sharing?
No, I mean, I think I mentioned before that I've had this tension working on this project, and I initially almost decided not to volunteer to join the stream, but I figured that I should at least examine that tension and understand it. I honestly learned a lot here. Some also biases I didn't realize I had. So I kind of walked in here not to be defensive, but to honestly learn as much as possible.
I respect that.
Granted, maybe I hid my defensiveness under my NDA stuff, but
look, I don't think you came off as defensive. You literally every single time you were like, "Look, I just wanna learn," and I honestly, every time you opened your mouth to say something, I was like, "Oh my God, Monty's gonna say something amazing and interesting and insightful." And
it always
was.
Right.
Exactly, every single time it was. So we're running out of time because Monty, you gotta go. I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining me on this journey. Thank you, Steve, for continuing on this journey with me. I'm super excited to see what Asians Represent is doing next. If any of you want to come on the wrap up, you let me know, and we'll do it. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon, but if you've got a topic you want us to cover, let me know. Follow us at AZNS Represent. Follow us on Twitch to know when we're going to go live. And thank you for tuning in every Friday and continuing to do that. We'll see you next week with the wrap up, our new show. Goodbye, everyone.
Anime credits.
Anime credits.
Yeah, anime credits go up.
Also, it looks like Scorpion Clan won the poll, but
Wow.
we got to rally. Come on.
You only gave 2 options, so
Yeah.
There's only 2 options.
Love you all, especially all
Yeah.
who voted for Scorpion.
know.